What up? Welcome to episode 26 of the Dealer Talk podcast. Man, is it going by quick. Season 2 is almost a wrap, but we still have some really amazing conversations ahead. So make sure to tune in. We got a special guest reserved just for the very end of the season. And man, is it a good conversation. Today, we're going to be talking about accountability. We're going to be talking about implementation and utilization within the dealership. The guest that we have is so good, is so awesome that we had to have him back on the show to talk about this topic. Make sure to take some notes. Listen to the episode multiple times so you can really grasp the conversation. You can really grasp the information and the insights that are being handed on this episode. Also, if you haven't done so already, make sure to share this podcast, share this episode with somebody that can benefit from the practical information so that they can take it back to the dealership and implement in their day-to-day. All right, without further ado, let's go on to the episode. Let's check it out. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Dealer Talk. So, on today's show, we're going to have our very first repeat guest. So, we're very excited about that. Before we get into it, Eric, what's up, dude?
Great morning, Herb. How you doing, man?
Oh, living the dream, brother. So today, on today's episode, we have our very first repeat guest. I'm very excited to have this gentleman back on with us. What are your thoughts?
I think it's a privilege whenever we have the opportunity to invite somebody back because of, they really just have so much knowledge and so much input and so much effect that we think that, our audience is owed that. So it's a gift.
I agree, sir. I agree. All right. So before we make the introduction here, I just wanted to kind of pick your brain on processes, accountability, like when you guys at your store level, right? When you guys either start a new process or you get a new piece of technology, right, to help you, go in the direction you're trying to go. How do you guys, what do you do as far as implementation and accountability? And the reason I'm asking that is because, I consult with a lot of stores and I see a lot of adoption, which I think that at the dealership level, we're really good at doing that. But then for whatever reason, it's very hard to either get those things to stick or get buy-in. So talk to me about that, dude.
Okay, so I think that accountability and implementation is look, if we're the managers or we're the leaders, whatever we call ourselves, whatever title we're entrusted with, I think that the first rung of responsibility lies on us. So I mean, it's our responsibility to set the trend in motion. So if we're considering to do something new as a store, then it's our responsibility for us to get up out of our seats and get off the desk or out of the office and go and do it first. So I mean, that's I'm a big believer in that, only because it builds trust from everybody else you're asking to do it as well. So that's my thoughts on it randomly.
All right, man. No, I agree with that. I mean, it definitely has to come from the top down for sure. So, all right, man. Well, that's one of the main topics of the discussion today. So I kind of wanted to get your side of it. Let's just get our guest on. He needs no introduction. Today on the show, we have, for the second time, Sean Kelley, the Car Biz Coach. What's up, Sean?
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's an honor and a privilege to be back with you guys today.
Oh man, we're so excited to have you back on. You're officially our first repeat guest. So we're super excited to have you, dude.
Awesome, man. We're gonna have a great conversation.
Yeah, dude. So let's just get into it, man. So 50,000 view, right? Obviously, you consult with a lot of stores. You were at the dealership doing your thing. What are your thoughts on implementation, accountability? Let us know.
I think it's one of the greatest challenges in our industry because there's just always so much going on, right? It's just pure chaos on the showroom floor, and it seems so random. So, to try to implement anything new is certainly a challenge, and there's a lot of barriers that prevent it from happening. And it's ironic, we're talking about this topic because yesterday I was just consulting and coaching for one of my tech partners, Co-Video. And we were talking about their sales cycle and how, when you sell it through different layers in the organization, how it affects the implementation, and how, you go through a general manager and the frontline staff doesn't know it's coming and they don't buy in and they resist. Or if you go into the middle management, there might be adoption and buy-in, but then the top doesn't know what's happening and they look at it, whatever. Sometimes they look at things like an expense and they'll just either cancel it out of nowhere, or they won't get behind the cause as well.
Well, talk to us more about that. What's been the challenges with that?
Well, here's the thing, guys. Have you ever, think about this, any adoption or implementation, I ask, and coaching managers and dealers across the country, I always ask them, what's getting in the way? Why won't your people do what you want them to do? And they almost always hit me with the same reason. Can you take a guess what that reason is?
No, you're the expert. Go ahead.
I hear lazy. I hear, have you guys heard that one? Oh, my people are lazy. They just won't do it. Do you ever hear that?
Now, look, if they're saying that, that's probably not the truth. But yeah, I'm sure that probably come up every once in a while.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, and here's the thing. It's almost never lazy. In fact, here's what I found, guys. There's only one of three reasons why someone won't adopt or utilize a tool or won't take advantage of new technology, whatever it is. There's only one of three reasons, all right? Either they don't see value in it, they think it's a waste of their time. Either they don't know how. Now, we can double click on each of these and talk more about them, which we certainly will. But if they don't see value in it, they don't know how to do it, or they're fearful of any sort of negative result. Could be. So each of these three areas we can kind of double click on and talk more about.
Yeah. I'm going to kind of switch gears here. Okay. So let me ask you this. This is really the question. And I apologize. I just want to get it. I want to get it all the way out because this is what's been bugging me. I've been thinking about this all morning long. I thought about it last night as well. Let's just say for conversation's sake, Sean, that you had the attention of absolutely every dealership on the podcast today. So you have everybody's attention everywhere in the land, okay? Not necessarily singling anybody out. Not to say that anybody's doing anything differently than everybody else, because every store has its own little niches, right? But what is the best? I'm talking about the best. That's capital B, brother. I want the absolute best piece of advice as a Car Biz Coach walking in the door that you're able to give them. So, I'm looking for power here, brother. I need you to come big.
When it comes to implementation,
yes,
I'm gonna say the best piece of advice around this topic is simply to have a process for presenting ideas and implementing them within your organization and making them part of the culture. You can't just buy something and then throw it against the wall and hope it sticks. It doesn't work like that. And that's why dealers waste hundreds of thousands, if not hundreds of millions of dollars a year buying tools and software or trying to implement things, processes, whatever, and they don't stick because there's no process for doing such. All right. So first, and would you want me to kind of walk you through just a generic process for this sort of topic?
Brother, I've asked for your best information here. So
coming your way.
Expecting nothing but the full deal. Go ahead.
Okay, so first off, if I'm in a dealership and I've got an idea, a tool or software that I want to implement at the ground level, all right, first off, I need to have a meeting about that and discuss it with anyone that would be using it and also anyone that would be paying the bill on it. we need to get together and everyone align to the why behind that tool. All right. So we need to discuss what are we trying to accomplish? What are the goals in leveraging this new tool? And what do we hope to get? What are going to be the desired results? Then we need to decide. All right. And that's the thing. The decisions need to be etched in granite on who's going to decide and when are they going to decide by. The follow-up meeting for the decision needs to be scheduled. And think about this. All these are moving parts that have to be coordinated. And when they're not happening, the whole implementation just erodes and falls by the wayside. So as I move through this process, think about how much work it takes to this is just setting up for the implementation. You know what I'm saying? So think about this process versus how it usually gets rolled out, right? So who's going to decide? When are we going to decide by? All right. And everyone, all the same stakeholders get back together. The decision maker, whether it's a board of votes or whether it's one person who chooses, but how's the decision being made? And then they need to sell that decision to everyone on the team. Because as I do our car motivators cultural assessments across the country, that's one of the biggest gripes that dealership employees have, is they give ideas, they send ideas up, but they don't ever hear back to know, was it a good idea? Do they care? And then as a result, they'll stop giving you ideas. They'll stop coming up with things. They'll stop finding better ways to improve the company. And that's bad, right? So number 3, sell the idea, sell the decision, okay? And from there, then you've got to figure out what are we going to measure to figure out if this is working or not, and how and when are we going to review, right? We have to set KPIs or key performance indicators in place to know if our new idea, process, or tool is actually being utilized and if it's making an impact or not. So we need to figure out what are we going to measure, when are we going to get back together and review it, and then we need to get back together again, discuss, and either improve, and I believe in the cycle of continuous improvement, or you ditch it, you delete it. And that's the thing in the car business, we're always adding to, we're always putting more stuff on people's plates, but we're never deleting things. We just kind of let the things that fall by the wayside that don't get implemented or utilized fall by the wayside. And that, my friends, is extremely wasteful, and it costs us a ton of money. You're investing, so if you're a dealer and you're investing in these tools, you don't know if it worked or not because no one implemented. There was no process for implementation.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because I've been at dealerships where maybe a new training program or a new process was put in place, right? And you hear the GM stand up there talking about the GSM, the sales manager, whomever. And like a proud papa, they start talking about the new process and how it's going to be implemented. And then they sit back with their arms folded like an expectant father, just like it's going to happen then. My question is this: whose responsibility is it to take the first step, and how?
Great question. Okay, so first and foremost, it's whoever the decision maker, whoever the one deciding, also has to be the one to sell it to the team, right? So that is step 1. You have to sell it to your team, and that means getting the buy-in. They have to see the value in it, or they're just not going to do it. All right, it's that simple. So how do you build the value in it? Help them understand what's in it for them. Okay, anytime you're going to make a change is 2 opposing forces pushing against each other. All right, there's the challenge and the desire for change versus the desire to stay in our comfort zone. And those 2 forces are constantly pushing against each other. So they have to see the value in it. They have to understand the with them, right? What's in it for me? Because no one on this planet does anything without a payout, especially not as car salespeople. So we've got to sell it. That's step 1. And then step 2 is the don't know how part, okay? And let's talk about that from the manager and the employee side, because managers don't know how to fit it in their day. For managers, yes, I agree with you. To your point earlier, they need to lead by example. They need to know how to use the tool. That is absolutely critical, because if the managers know how to use it, they can then continually coach and train their team on it. But beyond that, they also need to know how to fit it in their schedule. Managers always tell me, I really want my salespeople to come to work and plan their day and know what they're going to do each and every day and have a game plan and execute on it. But they don't do it themselves, right? Because, the showroom floor is too random. Well, guys, it's not, and it can be controlled, and you can schedule and own your day. But at the end of the day, you have to be realistic with your time. So managers have to know how to fit. They have to say, okay, if we're going to implement video, for instance, let's just use video as an example. How often am I going to do a video training class? When am I going to sit down with each individual member of my team and watch their videos and give them feedback and coaching? When am I going to sit down with people that aren't using video and have remedial coaching conversations around that? What's the accountability process if we do it and if we don't? All these things take a lot of time, right? This is just for the manager. All these things take a lot of time, and they've got to make it part of their routine and schedule. And in order to do that, they've got to know what they're doing each and every day. And then on the salesperson side, vendors in the auto industry, you talked about Herb being a responsible vendor earlier, and how he schedules it out. He calls in advance. He tells you when he's coming. Vendors in the auto space historically, they're a lot like the dealers, right? They sell the tool. You maybe don't hear from them. The training is crucial. That the employees have to know how to use the tool. And there's got to be a champion at that store. Whatever you're going to be doing, there's got to be someone championing it. And that person's got to be reporting to the key decision maker or stakeholder, letting people know how it's going. And that is another key element and critical factor to this whole thing.
Okay, so here's my question to you, because just having gotten to know you, listen, I got to imagine, because I know, being at several stores where, these implementations and what we're talking about, the fire that comes from it, oh my gosh, the tears flow, the gnashings of teeth. It's all incredible. We're talking about brimstone. We're talking about fire, okay? But have you been at stores where the effort was, and listen, I'm very sensitive to the fact that as a trainer, as what you do, you're from this coaching standpoint, you're paid by the stores for your effort. So you have to be very, very sensitive to this. But I mean, my question is this, and just hear me out, bro. My question is this. Have you been in a store where, you talk about the initiation, you talk about setting the example, and those people that have those opportunities to set the example, they did not do it, and you had to pull back and say, you know what, listen, my coaching process is not going to work for you. Well, why? What's going on? And you had to pull back from that because they weren't willing to take the first step. Because I believe in a lot of stores that some of the biggest hurdles is the top tier management. It's those folks that are not willing to change. They expect the change to come from the bottom up versus the top down. So, I mean, have you ever been faced with a situation like that?
Yes, absolutely. We are really, it's funny you said it, we're really good. One of my favorite things that I tell my dealers, and I mean it from the bottom of my heart, is we'd rather do no business than bad business.
Yes.
And that's simply because there's too many people that want coaching and can benefit from it for me to waste their time and my coach's time trying to push a broken down trade and up a hill. So we're really good at clarifying what coaching is up front and vetting out, I guess you could say, unideal clients. And we actually, before we even get into a project, we walk away from just over 20% of coaching opportunities that we've had because it wasn't going to be a good fit, because they just wanted training for their salespeople, and that's not what we do. Everything we do is we do work with the top, we do work with the leaders, because the body goes where the head goes, and they've got to be involved in the situation. Now, I've had situations where they weren't bought in, and they turned around because they saw the value in the coaching pretty quickly. But yes, there has been situations where we're trying to help implement something, and they weren't doing it. They weren't going to buy in, and they weren't going to change. And as we're going back again, measuring, reviewing, discussing, and improving, we're finding out real quick that, hey, this just isn't going to happen here, and here's why. And it's unfortunate, but when that happens, we just have to be. It's not right or wrong. It's just reality.
Well, I find that to be the most powerful thing about you. I got to be honest with you, and I know I'm cutting her off here, but the fact of the matter is that this is why you're invited back, okay? Because if as a coach, okay, if you're willing to take the financial gain out of it, you're willing to say, hey, listen, I'm not of value to the store. I'm not doing you any service, and you pull back out of that store. I think that speaks volume about you, Sean Kelley. I got to be honest with you. That's just doing the right thing, bro. I think that's an amazing trait about you.
Well, I appreciate that, man. One of the things I'm an Army veteran, and one of the, I guess, key things I learned in the military was integrity.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Yeah, no, I agree with what Eric said. That definitely says something about you. And yeah, man, again, we're excited to have you back on the show, dude.
Yeah. Well, I love it.
So,
Awesome to hear, guys.
my mind is going to maybe somewhat of a negative question, but I think it's important for us to kind of cover that as well. So, even when everything's coming from the top and there's buy-in and the leaders are committed, you're always going to get people at the bottom that don't want to adapt. They just don't want to. People are not comfortable with change. What is your advice, man? I mean, obviously you try to turn them around, but when do you get to a point where it's like, listen, I mean, we're just going to have to cut the limb, right? And not risk the rest of the body getting infected here. What are your thoughts on that, man? What has been your experience? How can we identify that at the dealership level, or how can we turn it around? How can we actually get people to, adopt a change maybe a little bit quicker, a little bit more effectively?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the $1 million question, right? It's like, how do we actually implement something new, keep our top performing salesperson who is fighting the change, right? Who everyone else looks up to, and get them to use the tool or the process? It's the $1 million question, and definitely something that we coach on quite frequently. So first off, this goes back to the implementation process, and involving everyone who's going to be using it in the discussion. Because bottom line is this, guys: if they build it, they own it. And if they own it, they act on it. All right. That's why they've got to be a part of the discussion. They've got to understand the challenges that this tool or process is going to fix and solve. And if you can help them understand that and then help them be a part of the design of the solution, it's their baby, and no one calls their own baby ugly. All right. It's that simple. So having them be a part of that, that's number one. And then once there's implementation, right, it's to set expectations ahead of time to say, here's what's going to happen if you use the tool. Here's the reward and recognition we're going to do, and here is the stick. Here's how we're going to hold people accountable to it, and then sticking by your guns. And at the end of the day, giving them a process. Here's what will happen if you use it. Here's what will happen if you don't, and then following through that process. The accountability piece is critical, because you've got to be able to be willing to hold your team accountable around these things, and then at the end of the day, you've got to make a choice. You've got to say, hey, we drew a line in the sand. Is it going to be the tool or the process or the person? And you've got to pick. And here on the other side of it, if you don't make that clear choice and set that expectation, then everything you're rolling out is simply a suggestion. Now, I'm not saying suggestions are wrong, right? I mean, sometimes it's good to just say, hey, guys, I'd really appreciate it if you would do this, but it's not a requirement to be on this team. On the other hand, it depends. It depends on the level of investment and the importance of the change you're trying to make at your dealership. If it's a business critical change that has got to be implemented, or it could cost your dealership business, or not just business, but its business overall, like if you could fall behind the competition without implementation, then it's critical, and you have to choose the entire team over one person. And that, my friends, has got to be drawn. That line has got to be drawn in the sand. But on the other side, here's a big challenge. Leaders hold their people accountable around a lot of silly stuff that doesn't really matter, and they use up all their leadership capital doing such. And I'll use a perfect example. And I'm not condoning people being late for work, but think about this. Why are you 5 minutes late for work? You can expend a lot of energy and leadership capital trying to get everyone to be right on time. Never mind the fact they worked 3 hours late last night because they had a late deal, and all of a sudden trying to get them to shoot a video. Like they're not, or go on social media or use the CRM, and they're just not going to do it. You wasted your leadership capital. You took too many withdrawals.
Man, I love that. I that's a great perspective.
Yes,
for sure, man. Especially when it comes to these sort of things, because everybody has kind of like their I don't want to call leadership units, but that's what comes to mind, right? And once
you make the deposits, right?
Right.
You make the deposits to help them. You add value. You show them the leader you are. Eric's notorious for this. Eric, you lead your team. You do a hell of a job leading your team, and you make a lot of deposits, which allows for you to make withdrawals, such as holding them accountable. And I think that's amazing, and that's how we have to lead our people. But you can definitely waste it on I guess you could say, superfluous things that are ego-driven sort of accountability, and then we don't, we miss the opportunity to hold them accountable where it matters most around some of our tools and processes that need to be implemented, right? So I think that's absolutely critical. And that's so important. And then also, guys, it's the one-on-one time. And this is going to be, I guess, Eric, you asked me for my biggest tip. This is going to be the biggest one, all right? It's sitting down with each individual player on the team and finding out, okay, what's working for you, what's not. And if they're not using the tool, finding out, is it that they don't see the value in it? Is it they don't have the ability to do it? They don't know how? Or is it that they're fearful, that it's a comfort zone challenge? Whatever it may be, every individual is not using the tool for a different reason. And you've got to sit down with them and have a one-on-one and figure out what that reason is. Otherwise, you can't address it.
I love that so much. I can't even express to you how much I absolutely love that. Yeah, I want to get uncomfortable, so brace yourself. Is your seatbelt on?
Oh, man.
I have a big question here, but it needs to be answered, okay? So for these older dealerships, let's say they've been very successful in the auto industry for years and years and years and years and years, and they've had the same GM there for a while, or GSM, and sales managers, finance directors. I mean, we talk about coaching and implementation and blah, 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 blah. It's mainly from a standpoint of, okay, we view this through the lens of from the sales people's standpoint, okay? They're the ones that need the most effort. Here's my question to you. At what point, if we have a vested interest in truly the success of a dealership, at what point do we sit down, I know initially, but at what point do we let the GMs, the GSMs, the sales managers, the directors, the finance managers, when do we let these guys go? I mean, at what point is enough enough? I mean, we're talking about the frontline soldiers being affected by decisions of people who are affecting not only their paycheck, but everybody else's paycheck too. So, I mean, this is such a big question, but let's stop dancing around it. I want to know your view on that, please.
I'm with you, brother. I'm going to call a spade here. And part of being a leader is knowing when you need to step down and knowing when you need to move on, right? And that's the biggest challenge. I think that's the biggest challenge in our industry is that, there's a lot of managers out there, but there's not a lot of leaders. And a leader knows when, okay, you know what? I have I've added the maximum value. I've developed all the people to the limit that I possibly can. And it's time for me to grow. It's time for me to move on, or it's time for me to retire or whatever. And I think that, they get comfortable with the paycheck. They get comfortable with the job. And you're right. You're 100%. They stay where they're at to the detriment of their people. So, to that point, I think that, number one, they've got to be proactive and decide to move on. It's no different than what I did at my dealership. I knew that coaching was my passion and I was ready to move on. And I coached my replacements up and I quit to start my own business. And we promoted 7 people under me. They were ready to take the reins and I was ready to move on, and I knew it. Now, believe me when I say this, I've screwed up so many times that please don't think that I'm perfect by any means. But yeah, I think that we've got to self-identify when we're no longer adding value. And that goes beyond, it's grooming the next layer of people for the next role. At the end of the day, if you're going to stay on that boat as that leader, that's okay too, as long as you need to be grooming the people under you, making them better. Set it up to where you don't have to do anything. If you do your job right, that's what happens.
Okay, that's fantastic. I think being able to be self-aware is probably the number one trait of being a leader. But we're talking about management staff here, okay? And sometimes there's egos involved where they think they're Superman, Superwoman sitting up there, and they don't have the ability to say, you know what, I absolutely suck at what I do. My question for you is when the individual over them, in charge of their results, in charge of them, when should they have a vested interest in saying, hey, look,
what you're doing is affecting us so much, or I can no longer afford to have you here. How do we recognize those ripples? That's I mean, hopefully we're hyper aware of it. But my gosh, that's I mean, I don't want to dance around it, bro. I want to hit somebody in the mouth about this deal. Okay.
So let me tell you.
Let's go.
So think about this for a second, right? The frontline staff, the frontline leaders, the ones that are running the store, all right, they are reporting generally, and this is just generally speaking, for most dealers, they're reporting to the dealer principal, who's quasi involved, usually stop in, does a lot of strategic thinking, and they're generally just looking at the results for the store. And that's how the senior leaders or the owners decide which managers stay on the team. Are we getting the results we want, right? Would you agree, yes or no?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing. There's a lot of different ways to get results, right? I can sell a car by lying, cheating, and stealing, almost easier than I can doing it through integrity and honesty and building value, right? So at the end of the day, the results, if you only focused on the results, you're going to miss everything else that produces those results. And some of those results, while they're nice in the short term, it's not a long-term model. That it's probably not aligned to the direction a leader wants to take the company. So to answer your question, we have to look at something other than the results. We have to look at the process. We have to talk to our people. In fact, dealers, one of the things that I really like to do at dealership level when I'm coaching a dealer group or dealership as a whole is do my cultural assessment. I have a cultural assessment, and then I have and then I have a survey. I call it my inspired satisfaction survey. And what this does is it really, number one, it predicts employee turnover. Number two, you really find out, who's carrying their weight, and that covers. It holds true for everyone in the organization, from the managers to the owner and every frontline staff. So you've got to have a really good 360-degree view of what's going on within your dealership, and beyond looking at the results, you have to look at the behaviors and activities. You've got to set the destination of your company. You got to say, this is where we're going, and then you got to figure out who shouldn't be on that bus. Because if you do have the wrong people in the wrong seats, it can spell disaster long term.
So this is my point. Okay, this is where I can bring the most value to you, Sean Kelley, the Car Biz Coach, is because when I talk about training, you correct me in the background by saying coaching. Your biggest benefit to this industry is not to train the sales staff. It's more to coach the people that are in charge. That is where your gift is at. And I think that is where your power is at. And quite frankly, I'd be remiss not to mention that, because I believe in you and your mission. And I don't want to oversell it, but I'm certainly going to try. You know what I mean?
I appreciate you, bro.
I do. I mean that wholeheartedly.
Well, it means the world to me.
Yeah.
Well, this is to your point, right? I've got a dealer group in Ohio. They're like 6 stores if you count their power sports store. But the things the managers wanted, monthly meetings with the owner. They wanted one-on-ones with the owner. So we're looking at the owner. So I'm coaching the owner of this dealer group, and we put together we take inventory of his time and his activities. So here they want to implement these new things, and we take inventory of the owner's time, and we find out he's got about 21 hours a day worth of things to do. All right. And then what we do is we have to figure out which of those things can we delegate out, which can we delete, which can we defer. And literally with 2 1-hour coaching sessions with the dealer principal, we were able to free up over 15 hours a week worth of time for him. And not only were more things getting done that needed to get done, because he couldn't do 20 hours a day worth of stuff, right? Not only is he getting more things done, but now he freed up the time to sit down with his management team. And in doing so, in facilitating those meetings and teaching his managers how to do the same thing, they are operating significantly more effectively and efficiently. And that is, I agree. I think that's one of the ways that we add a ton of value is, we do have we start with the top and we work our way down from there versus most training in the auto industry, which starts at the grassroots level. And I have so many trainers, Eric, that tell me, you're crazy, man. You work with the managers and the owners. What are you doing? That's nuts. And I'm like, sorry, I'm taking the road less traveled, because to me, that's what makes the impact at the dealerships.
Yeah, man. No, I totally agree. I kind of wanted to, that kind of put me in or generated a question in my mind, but I'm trying to figure out how to kind of segue to it. It's still related to the topic, but I want to kind of take it into the training part of it, right? Because I know obviously that's one of the things that you guys do or coach, right? So you know, okay, so let's say just structurally, we got the implementation, we got buy-in, everybody's in, we've weeded out the people that are just not going to make it. And now we're ready to make this thing work, right? Now we're ready to either make that process stick or that tool, whatever. How talk to us about the training part of it, like frequency, you know, and I know it depends on what it is, but just on a general type of a concept, right? You know, frequency. How often do we got to do this? When do you get to a point where you're like, okay, this is a done deal. It's ingrained in the people, and we're done here.
Great question, Herb. You know, it's interesting on frequency. The frequency question, I figured that out about 3.5 years ago at my dealership. At the time, I had just started coaching my guys. We were starting to have some good results, but the problem was that it hadn't fully taken hold. And I had about the industry average turnover at that point, which, you know, is 71%. So with 71% turnover across the country, any training you do, that means 12 months from now, only 29% of it has been retained. So what you have to do is you have to really look at your store's turnover. And by the way, dealers, if you're not measuring your store's turnover percentages, you are missing then you just don't know how often and how frequent to implement the training. So really important that that you involve your team in the training. Okay, figure out who is your champion at the store level. Who are your best adopters and who's getting the best results from it? Have them do the training. Managers, you don't have to do everything, okay? You know, and when you delegate stuff out like the training, I promise you there's people on your team that do things better than you do. You know, no one's good at everything, but everyone's good at something. So figure out what that something is. Have your team train the rest of the team on it, because your salespeople have already heard you say it 75 different times. So let them have a new perspective. And from an employee who does see the value and is gaining from it, he'll be able to share that and sell that to the team. So yeah, have your people involved, and it needs to be a consistent, ongoing thing. But it's certainly, when it comes to like vendor software installs, you've got to involve. You definitely want to involve the vendor, and you've got to look at your turnover, because as soon as you've trained 10 people and 4 of them are gone, and now you've got 4 new people, and those 4 new people are like, well, I used to have this at my old dealership, or I'm not doing that. That's a stretch. You know, that's way uncomfortable for me. Then it just starts again seeping back into the cracks of you know what, this isn't valuable. So yeah, I think it's got to be consistent, ongoing process. It involves your team. It involves the vendor, and you've got to look at your turnover to really know what frequency would make sense.
I want to kind of develop that thought here for a second, because you said 2 things that caught my attention. So number one, you talked about a champion, and I like that concept of having somebody kind of champion that within the dealership. The problem that I found with that strategy is that a lot of times we're picking the wrong champion. You know what I mean? So we think that because Joe is the number one salesperson in the store and we make him the champion of the product, then that's gonna work amazing. Well, Joe doesn't care about the product. Joe only cares about selling, hitting his numbers and selling as many cars as possible. And so it just doesn't work. And then meanwhile, there may be somebody that's not as proficient or is not as good at selling cars. But if you made that person the champion of X, then the store itself would have a lot more success with that. I mean, do you find that that's the case? Can we talk about that?
Oh my gosh, do you guys have like 2 more hours? Yeah, unbelievable. It's so funny. I just had a flashback to last week, actually. So I was suggesting exactly what we were talking about here, right? I said, hey, you've got a guy who's really good at. Actually, he was their top internet lead closer. I was like, this guy is your top internet lead closer by far. He's about 5% ahead of the national average. I was like, let's make him the champion and let's have him start training the other stores on, just once a month or whatever, on handling internet leads. And the owner says to me, he's like, oh, no one will take him seriously. And I was like, did you ask everyone? I was like, is it possible you're making some assumptions here? And he said, you know what? I haven't asked people. I just think because he doesn't sell a lot of cars. And that's the problem. We look at, when I say we, I mean the auto industry, we look at our salespeople's success holistically. We're like, oh, there's a 20-car guy. He's great. Well, he's great at what, right? If you really start dissecting, he might be great with lot ups, but he might be horrible on the phone or internet or with your service customers, right? So not everyone's good at everything, but everyone's good at something. We really have to know our team. What are their strengths? And by the way, going back to that store. So we have 4 workshops, which involved every single salesperson, every single manager. And I asked every single workshop, hey, here are the stats for the internet closing percentage. This person is the top by far. He's crushing it. Would you guys be open to him giving a class on what he does and how he does it? Guess what? Not one no vote. Everyone raised their hand. They wanted to be a part of it. So bottom line is that, we've got to stop looking at our employees holistically as to say like, oh, they're great. Just because we look at their result and it's good doesn't mean they're good at everything. So yes, figuring out who's actually good in which area is critical. And then having them be a part of that. Does that make sense? Does that answer that question or challenge?
No, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely wanted to touch.
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on that because I've seen that so many times, and it's like, dude, but why? This guy's horrible at that, and this guy over here would be amazing at it. Why? What's going on? So, yeah, man. So, and then the other thing that caught my attention was we talked about the vendor side of things, right? And I definitely want to cover that because I think, and this is I'm talking from my own personal experience. So this is something that I have done in my career. Somebody buys a product or a solution, and then we go in there for a day, and when we spend the day at the dealer, and it's great, and then we leave, and then what? And then the dealer calls, a month later, and he's like, hey, I'm going to cancel. And it's like, why? Why are you going to cancel? This is amazing. Look at all these results. So I think as vendors, we're very good at taking credit, right? We're awesome at taking credit. Oh, look at all the stuff that we did for you. But we're terrible when it comes to, hey, man, your stuff's not working. We're like, oh, no, it's not us. It's, you guys are not using it, or the implementation isn't there. You know what I mean? So how, as a vendor, right, how can we get to a point where we, are offering that support that's going to get stickiness, right?
Great question, my friend. Well, my advice for you vendors on this, and I coach a lot of vendors, Drive-Centric, Co-Video, iRecon Cars. I got a bunch of vendors we work with. I would say, number one, stop taking credit when things go well. All right, you didn't do it. I'm sorry, but as a coach, people are constantly, Sean, thank you so much. And I'm like, no, you did it. I had nothing to do with it. Okay, I just asked questions. You came up with the game plan and you did it. If you take credit for what goes well, you're also going to take credit for what goes wrong. It's a law of reciprocity. You can't stop it. So my point is stop taking credit. Okay, that's number one. Number two, set expectations up front. Okay, it's that simple. How are we going to measure and track whether it's working or not? When we have a discussion, what does that discussion sound like, right? It can't be, Eric, why aren't you using our tool? No, it's got to be, Eric, what's getting in the way of your tool? What's getting in the way of you using it? When are we going to follow up? How often, and what is the frequency of that follow-up and support? And then vendors, you've got to, and this, man, vendors, for the love of God, if it's not working, walk away. Seriously, and Eric brought this up earlier. Walk away, guys. This is the reason that dealers don't listen to vendors' pitches. You guys, you know how I operate, and you have enough. Imagine that. Believe it or not, I talk to a dealer. I don't have time to talk to you about that right now. They don't want to talk. Okay, no problem. It's to me, it's like, why won't they hear me out? But that's because the vendors we're always, again, there's so many vendors. A lot of them are so good at selling, but not good at the support and the follow up or the implementation side. And at the end of the day, dealers get fed up. There's so many tools. It's hard for them to know the difference between a good one or a bad one. So vendors, if you start walking out on projects, if you start quitting projects, which again, to Eric's point earlier, my very first project I walked away from because it was recruiting and new hire training. And that's just not what we do, right? So I said, look, I want to lower your turnover and help your top producers improve, not keep shoving meat in the grinder. Can we switch? Can we start coaching? And they said, no, we want you to keep doing this. And I said, well, here's some business cards for some people that do that, or I can transfer these skills to someone inside your company, which we did, and we ended up walking away from that project. So that's vendors what you've got to do. It will build your reputation, it'll help your brand, and at the end of the day, you'll help your dealers. You'll help them. You'll help the rest of the vendors do better at dealerships.
Dude, I love that, man. Great way. Great thoughts. Yeah, man, for sure. All right. So, man, we are out of time, but it's been an amazing conversation. So we got to do Sean Kelley part 3. So
I'm in, man. Let me know. I love hanging out with you guys. I love the conversations. I think you guys bring so much value to the dealer community that I just, please keep up your show, guys. Your podcast is absolutely amazing.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that. So listen, I've already asked this question, but it's my thing. So I got to ask it again. Where do you see the automotive industry in the next 5 years and why?
Well, I think we're going to continue to see technology grow to the point where customers have a choice to buy from computers instead of people. I think dealers, I think salespeople now have a choice. Do they want to become, hourly product specialists, or do they want to become true professional salespeople? And those commission margins are going to continue to separate as dealers are, the velocity selling model isn't going anywhere. So leaders, if you want to stay relevant, you've got to start developing your people. No manager ever got fired for creating a bunch of 25 and 30 car salespeople. So leaders, develop your people if you want to stay relevant. Create a process for implementing the tools, and vendors, stop taking credit for the good and you want them to take credit for the bad.
Right on, man. Right on. Really quick, I just want to get your thoughts on this question, but on the training side and at the dealership level, how do you think that's going to evolve, right? Because my thought is, I think we're going to be, and we just had Sean Welsh on the show and he referenced this too. He talked about us becoming more customer service centric, right? Just as a differentiator in the industry. What are your thoughts on that part of the evolution of the industry, and how do you see that evolving in the next 5 years? More, less, hybrid of some sort?
Well, I'm going to accomplish my mission, and managers across the country are going to become masterful coaches. So that's number one. They're going to learn to tap into each salesperson's individual strengths, and they're going to ask questions and listen. And as a result, salespeople are going to get better at conversing and coaching their customers. So I think that it's all about the customer experience. And if we're going to set ourselves apart from all the dealers that are using the technology to, and things like that, we've got to be really good at creating amazing customer experiences. We've got to be really good at asking great questions. And then we have to add a ton of value by making suggestions to the customer, things that they didn't pick out for themselves. So at the end of the day, I think it's all about the individual interactions, and those have got to be absolutely amazing. And that is what's going to help a dealership succeed with the market going where it's going.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Thanks for your thoughts, brother. How can people get in touch with you?
I appreciate that, guys. Anyone can text me on my cell phone or email me anytime you want. I will respond within 24 to 48 hours. If you call me, I probably won't answer because I'm coaching someone, but text or email is best. 314-323-8234. Again, that's 314-323-8234, or Sean, SEAN, at carmotivators.com.
Right on, man. We'll definitely put it in the notes. And just want to say, man, I'm very excited to hang out with you next week. We're going to be hitting some dealers together in the San Francisco area. So, dude, excited. I can't wait to meet up with you, dude. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm so stoked for that. We're going to have a great day, my friend.
Right on, brother. All right, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for tuning in. And as usual, we'll talk later. So you made it all the way to the end. Thank you so much. Just want to remind everybody to go to the website at dealertalk.biz. Leave us your questions. Give us your feedback. We really appreciate it. And we'll talk later.